All right, welcome to Creator Hardware, and today we're building a render server for Adobe Premiere Pro. Now, a while ago, I did a video on setting up a render server. In that video, I used my gaming PC as my render server, which at the time worked fine. Now, I've since replaced that gaming PC with a custom-built AMD built by me, fully water-cooled. Now, unfortunately, I use that PC for doing captures as well as streaming on my main channel, and using it as a render server while I'm streaming or doing capture would kind of defeat the purpose. The whole point of a render server is it doesn't interrupt your workflow. The whole point of it. Now, currently, I've just been rendering it natively on my editing PC, which is okay, except it kind of limits me on what I can do while it's rendering. Occasionally, I do some contract work doing some editing for other people, and unfortunately, that means I can't do anything other than wait for it to finish rendering, which is where a render server comes in. Now, this is not going to be its final form. This was more importantly a proof of concept and kind of figuring out cooling. May not even be the final case. It will be rack mounted, probably, but the case itself is my old Unraid server. Now, it's got a couple of Be Quiet fans in the front, couple in the back. Now, for this build, I'm using an AMD 3600, which is what this board had on it when it was my Unraid server. Like I said, probably not going to be the final form. I threw the 32 gigs of RAM in there that I had in my Intel gaming PC that was my render server. I know a bunch of people are going to ask, why not just use the Intel CPU in that board as my render server? And the problem is heat. As of right now, this 90 mil Thermalright cooler is the largest cooler I have that will fit in a 4U chassis. It will not handle a 99K overclocked to 5 gigahertz all-core under a CPU workload. I know it will not. You know, they're not as hot as 13 or 14 generation, but they're more stable. Now, I'm using my RTX 3080 Ti. I have it. I own it. It still works great. Now, how I'm going to set it up in its final form, I'm not quite sure. Probably going to do a different case with better airflow, maybe some RGB. Now, render servers, you have to have at least the same GPU brand. Doesn't have to be the same model or anything like that. It has to be Intel, AMD, NVIDIA, all the same, because CUDA versus AMD and Intel, etc. So that's what I'm going to use. But when it comes down to final deployment, I'm not sure if I'm going to go through a Proxmox install so I can remote into it easier, or whether or not I'm going to do a Windows 10 bare metal installation and just get one of those dummy plugs that make it think the monitor is hooked up and remote into it with Parsec or one of the other remote tools that are free. All that's to be determined. This is more of a proof of concept. One of the big things is, can I fit my 3080 Ti in a 4U chassis and actually power it? And the original cables, I have to go through the jumpers. These cables just won't actually clear the lid. With the jumper cables plugged in, the lid will clear, doesn't put undue pressure on the cable, so I can run it. Airflow on this case, though, is mediocre. On a gaming workload like heaven, 80, let's see, it's currently running 76C. I saw as high as 80. CPU cooler for just the 3600, not really optimized for voltage or anything like that. It can, under full CPU workload of Cinebench, 80C, so cooling is not the best in this case. I knew that going into it. That's why it's proof of concept more than the actual deployment. Now, if you want to see the final form of my render server, get subscribed because it will get built. It's just, I don't want to build it and then find out it overheats on a long render, or I degrade my EVGA for the Win 3 card because, rip EVGA. One of the reasons why this is not going to be my permanent installation is I think this 3600 is going to be a little slow and probably get up there in temperatures on long renders. I'm gonna go ahead and continue working on this. So as always, thanks for watching. This is Creator Hardware.